Extractives, Baraza, and Shatmore for inviting me. Thanks to Doris and Energy Solutions Africa for making it possible. And thank you for giving me your time. Morindia went through a really comprehensive presentation of a well-researched and presented document. And I think what the slide you ended up with is where members actually did pick up. So how do we go about answering those questions? And she's given me a few questions to look at and creating a framework in which to present that. A few things let me say first. I am often referred to as somebody who advises on local content. I do, but I don't like the term local content. I think it's misleading and it sends the wrong message about what we're trying to achieve. And I think language and the way you think of a subject dictates the behavior towards it. And local content almost seems to say, well, we want to participate, what can we get? You know, when in truth and in fact, you own the resources. You're inviting others to come in for a reason. And discussion should be around what can you bring? Yeah? And in bringing that, how can we support you to do what you want? So I think the idea of in-country value sends a different kind of message. And I will speak to that. But looking at what Morindia presented, you can see there are many assets, many factors that influence local content, from legislation to procurement to capacity building. And it is very complex. And in dealing with complex issues, we tend to either focus on one or other, miss some, and quite often miss the linkages. So what I try to do in advising on local content is let's put all these interacting pieces in some kind of framework where we can see and the linkages and see how one thing affects the other and how one thing leads to another or not, and whether the system you have in place is functioning. Like everything else, local content is an ecosystem of its own. And ecosystems, as you know, have dependencies. And if one member isn't functioning, the whole system runs the risk of being hurt. So what I will do is give you that some kinds of frameworks you can think about. I will address some of the issues that Morindia put up on this question over the course of this day. But really and truly, this is about you. And this is about getting answers about for what you want to do. So while I will give you a framework and some examples, it really is putting it in the Kenyan context. And I would really like to hear from you as we go through the day what you see in this that can help you in your thinking, what is missing in what you want. And the better I understand what you're looking for, better I might be able to help. So with that background, let me just say this. This is what I'm going to talk about today. An introduction, giving some context around local content and the frame for it. And some of you who were at the launch of the policy work would have seen some of these slides, but I've changed it a little bit. And it also goes into looking at how it aligns with national development and national priorities. And I think that's quite important. And you see in the presentation how I see that. That is why I mentioned that local content isn't the right term. And then implementing it. Implementing it through building capacity in individuals and in firms, getting them to improve, and then using oil and gas, the petroleum sector, to help develop other sectors. And it'll be interesting to see how we can make linkages, and I'll pull some examples, see how that has happened in the first instance, in different places. So let's have a look at this, yeah? And none of this is general. So the question was raised earlier, and I put this slide in there. Why this quest for local content? Why is it so important, and why so in oil and gas? That's fine. Cool. Let me take this off. Okay, my power supply is loose. Okay, so here's the reality. Historically, I don't think it's fine. Historically, the communities around extractives have seen their resources depleted, have seen people coming, and have seen people get employment and leave. And they end up no better off than they were before the resources were extracted. And they've suffered for it, they've had disruption to their livelihoods. And you know, people think, hang on, if this is happening, why can't I be a part of that? Why don't I have a role to play? And the typical answer is, well, this is actually quite complex, it is very technical, it's risky, you're not ready, so therefore, let's do it. And let's make this profitable and give as much of the profits back to the government in taxes. Let's increase the taxes. But you know, a couple of things are flawed in that argument, especially in oil and gas contracts. Because in oil and gas, companies spend money, sometimes money they borrow, most times money they borrow, do activities, produce oil, sell the oil, and then recover the cost of that oil, all the expenses from that revenue from the sale of oil. So in truth and in fact, the country, the owners of the resource, are paying those costs out of their oil. And not only are they paying the costs, all the extra interest charges are paid into that. So countries have a sense that, hang on, I'm paying for this. If I'm paying for this, shouldn't I have some say in who does what for it? I mean, I put it in that personal perspective. If I'm building a house and I hire a contractor and I'm paying him and he's bringing masons and carpenters and laborers, and I have a brother who's a laborer who's unemployed, do I have a right to tell to this contractor, I want you to employ my brother who's a laborer? What do you think? Yeah? And if this laborer, if your brother is not a very good laborer, would you keep him on the project? You might, but you know you're paying a cost for it, yeah? And if your brother is a mason in training, not quite there yet, but this job is quite a big project, and he has some expert masons, do you think you have a right to say, while you're doing this, can you hire my brother and let him work with your expert masons, your master masons, so he can learn and improve? And so my next project, he can get a job. Do you think I have a right to do that? What gives you that right? The fact that you're paying for it gives you that right, isn't it? So if you're paying for the oil and gas exploration, development, and production, you might think you have a right. Yeah? Now, that sounds strange. I see a lot of critical faces. It seems as if this doesn't seem right, you know? And I think that is the nature of extractive industries and foreign investment. And that's why I don't like the term local content. Because we put ourselves in a secondary, subsidiary position to the investors. And we think, rightfully, at the point we're at, that we can't get the resource out to the ground without the help of the investors. But investors need access to resources to invest their money, to make money. What that says is that there are two parties who mutually can support each other and who can benefit from each other. And if you understand the value of the resource to the investor, then the decisions you make about relationships will be quite different. If you think your resource is of no value, then you treat it that way, and you get little in return. The reality is, as countries, I come from the Caribbean, which had a similar history to Africa. We had a similar history where labor and resources were treated as cheap or free commodities. And as businesses developed, that remained the same. And the people who benefited were the investors. And we remained as low-level employees and getting low value for resources. Now, luckily for us in the Caribbean and Trinidad, we saw what the Arabs did during the OPEC days and said, hang on, this resource has more value than we're getting. What's missing here? What's wrong with this picture? And they went in and they said, let's get into that value chain and capture more value. Now, in truth and in fact, we've actually seen that previously because we've gone through a period in our history of slavery, colonialism, exploitation of resources that said, we're missing something here. There are these three factors of productivity, labor, resources, and capital, and we're not getting the value that the resources bring. So how do we think about that? And I'll show you some things that we've thought about, we've seen other people do, and bring a picture together and say, how do you get some balance between the value that the two parties retain out of this resource? Yeah? One of the things that we know and we see is that quite often the way companies go about procuring services don't always lend themselves to locals participating, and I'll show you some of that. On the other hand, companies are very good at finding ways to make locals participate by the way they procure. We all know that oil and gas is expensive. A lot of money is spent. And that is the point. A lot of money is spent on goods and services to somebody else. Right? And how do we get those goods and services? We all think the industry is risky. And that is true. But the inputs to the industry are not all risky. So if, for instance, I was providing a service, and that service is off the shelf, very simple, the only risk I face, if the company may spend $100 million, drill a dry hole, and lose all that money, that is risky. But that $100 million is paid to suppliers. Their risk is not a dry hole. Their risk is that they don't deliver on what they promised. Yeah? So how we think about risk is also quite different. So there are a lot of issues, and I won't go through the details here, that have caused us to say, hang on, there's something there that we're not getting, there are reasons we're not getting it. How can we overcome those challenges? And how can we, as the people who own the resource, as those nearer to the activities, participate? One of the things that we heard this morning is about local, meaning people on the ground, and local being country. And internally we have challenges about how we manage things. And one of the biggest struggles we have in managing oil and gas in particular is how we treat with it over time. And the reason I say that is that there are three parties involved in oil and gas activities. There's the government, who manages on behalf of the people, there's the investor, and there are the people who are the owners. And quite often the goals or the short-term objectives aren't aligned between government and people because of the political cycles. So those often require a longer-term look. Companies have long-term investments and want to make sure that they're protected over time. So the situation isn't always stable. And one of the things that I point out to you is that what needs to happen for local content to work is a governance framework that provides the kind of stability and predictability that allows for investors, local or foreign, to get involved. Yeah? So, getting to some of these details a little bit later on, well, what I want to say, and this comes back to the last slide Moendia had, is that there are four things, I call them four pillars, that are required for getting local content. One is that you can't participate in the sector unless you have the capability to. So building capability is quite important. One, in individuals, and two, in companies, to be able to participate. Even if locals have the skills, they may not get the opportunity to offer the goods or services if the procuring company doesn't have a strategy or an approach that facilitates that. And in many cases, companies have procurement strategies that actually work against local content. And I'll show you examples of how that works for and against local content. But all of this, you can have the best capacity building for people, for businesses, have the best businesses, with procurement strategies. Given the nature of the industry and the fact that things change over time, it means somebody must have the eye on the ball. Because there's so many moving parts, as you'll see, it means somebody must coordinate it. And because there's so many variables, things can always change and go off kilter, and people not know what's happening. So there must be, to manage all this, a good governance framework. And I think the report will refer to that. So I kind of put those in context for you in the next few slides. Yeah? But I want you to remember this. Whereas we think of local content in different ways, and that itself is a challenge. Some see local content as jobs. Some see it as companies getting services or making profits. Then we heard about the opportunity to support other sectors of the economy. Those are all true, but ultimately they all contribute to an end goal, which is to support national economic development. And if we look at that context and we say, hang on, if that is the goal we're aiming towards, what really is that goal? What does national economic development mean? And I'll show you how to think about that, or how in putting together your plan, you consider where you're heading before you just develop your strategy and the policies to implement those strategies. Yeah? So think about that. Think about what you want as a nation. Now, we hear, for instance, that the other sectors, like manufacturing, that need to be supported. How does the oil and gas industry do that? And you can quickly say, well, very quickly, if we had natural gas, we had reliable power available everywhere, then that will help manufacturing. Then we can think about, is there raw materials that can go to manufacturing? And those are simple, and I'll show you the other not so simple, not so direct, indirect things that actually make a lot of sense to support manufacturing. And I'll give it to you in the context of experiences we've had in Trinidad and Tobago and other places. Yeah? One of the challenges we have with local content, because people have so many expectations of it, so many different views on it, is how to define it. And I like to make things as simple as possible and then work from there. Right? Now, if you think about content, content is like an ingredient. What goes into something? Yeah? And I would say, and I'll show you how I think about it in that way, that the inputs into an activity are its component parts, is the content. And we have to then ask the question, what does local mean? And again, we have questions around that. So generally, there are laws, and you put a lot of laws on the books there that describe certain things. There's probably a law that deals with nationalization, immigration, that defines who is a local. And it may be a citizen or a national, nationals, citizens, and those who become resident. But then there's the issue of local, meaning community. We know too, but we don't speak about this, is the elephant in the room, that actually, under common market trade agreements, every national of every country should be treated equally. Whether or not that's implemented, I don't know. But think a company like Tullow making discrimination against a Ugandan from applying for a job, the exposure it has. Now, there are ways to get over that. But if the law is you must treat all nationals in the region as equal, how do you deal with that? What is local? I want to say this too, and I'll come back to this again. It's natural to want to protect and actually advocate protectionism as a way for building capacity. But if you don't get a chance to participate, you'll never be able to participate. One of the things that I showed on the earlier slide is that traditional oil and gas laws and contracts have this clause written by lawyers who are well-intentioned. Are there any lawyers in this room now? So I can go ahead. Yeah, so it says you will give locals preference provided they have the capability, they give you the same quality service and at the same price in a timely manner. That is good legal language, yeah? It's logical, it makes sense. But if you've never done it before, when the first tender comes out, you would not have had the experience to do it, and therefore you're disqualified. Now, imagine this exercise repeated 15 times over 5 years. The second time the tender comes out, you still haven't got the experience. You don't qualify. The third time, up to the 15th time, you still not qualified. Yeah? So that language that is a relic of the 1970s exists across the world still. A lot of the languages and contracts and laws we have are relics of a different time that nobody's challenged. You know, one of the things our cultures do is take truth from written documents. Thank God for Donald Trump. He's teaching us differently, yeah? So that is the kind of problems we face. But local definition doesn't stop with individuals. It also goes to firms. And if you look at local definitions, even in your own laws, I suspect you have different definitions of local. But you may have local definitions based on trade rules that say something is considered local if more than 40% is added. You may have different definitions that the central bank uses. You may have different definitions in different places. Now, many times people see local company should be one that's registered locally. That can mean anything. A foreign company can register locally. Does that make it a local company? Or it says a company that's majority locally owned, meaning the shareholding is majority owned by locals as defined above. Does that make it local? If a company has 60% local ownership, 40% foreign ownership, but the shareholders agreement describes that the profits will be disbursed 90% foreign, 10% local. Decision making at the board level will be voting 90-10. Those are shareholders agreements that don't align with shareholding agreements for some reason. So what we've seen has worked is the concept that has been in the laws in Trinidad oil industry since 1974. And it describes beneficial ownership in this way. It says that that personal entity that ultimately benefits from the proceeds of the enterprise. And that is becoming more popular in literature and in contracts today, issue of beneficial ownership. And that really says what stays in the economy. Yeah? So local content, as I described, only happens when somebody participates in the sector, either by providing goods and services or by being employed. And quite often people refer to these things as backward economic linkages. If there's something in place already, can I go back and get it and use it? Yeah? So that's the local content side. There's another concept that comes up from time to time and is often interwoven with local content, and it's the issue of value addition. And there are two kinds of value addition. And the one we normally speak about is downstream and midstream activities, taking the resource and adding value to it by converting it or using it to do something else. And that's also called beneficiation or forward economic linkages. And that we know, and we talk about refining and using gas to power and so on. But the one that I think Melba asked me to address in this thing here is the lateral linkages. Using what the oil and gas industry does, creates, has, builds to support other sectors. And this, I think, is very valuable for a country like Kenya, or any country to think about. And the questions I would ask you to think about is what ultimately are the industries you want to grow and build to sustain the economy. And that's important because oil and gas will come to an end. It's not infinite. It might give you good living for some time, and then that will go away. What we've seen in different places is that during that time of good living, existing industries have suffered and been destroyed in many places, as we sometimes call the Dutch disease. But, and I'll show this, oil and gas has the potential to improve the quality of other industries. And how do we make sure that happens is what we're trying to do here. So one of the things that I keep reminding people is the petroleum sector, in spite of all the bad things we say about it, actually is very good business. The companies who come in your midst, and I will call Tullow, Shell, Schlumberger, Halliburton, they're not just some of the best oil field companies in the world. They're some of the best companies in the world, but no industry. What makes a great company? It's how it's managed, how it uses its resources, its assets, its people, how it develops people, how it builds systems and procedures, how it holds people accountable. These are the things that make great companies. How they develop the supply chain. Yeah? You have in your midst, in Kenya, some of the world's greatest companies. How do you get those things that make them great to, by osmosis or otherwise, move into your companies who work alongside them? And how do we then get those local companies who learn these things or these skills or have these services to offer those to other sectors? How do you seek those out? Because if you raise the standard of services companies who are servicing the oil and gas sector, and some of these go across other sectors, what does that do to the other sectors? What does that raise them? And those are the kinds of things we have to seek out. Seek out the benefits that the oil and gas sector brings, and then go after that, use that in other areas. Now, this sounds straightforward, but the reality is the oil and gas sector is very complex. The activities are quite detailed, and understanding where the opportunities are takes some really experienced insight. I've seen countries struggle with figuring this out, and the main reason they struggle is that the expertise does not reside outside the oil and gas industry. It lies in the companies. People who can best tell you what makes up the services on an oil field. What kinds of skills do I need? What kind of equipment? How many? When? What training people need to get? Are the oil field people. You don't get those from academia. You don't get those from aid agencies who have people working for them or work in the industry. The devil is in the detail. And if you don't get to the detail, you always have a peripheral policy. Yeah? I've worked, as you heard from the MC, in the industry for government. I spent a lot of my career in government, reached a very high level, was involved in all kinds of policy decision making, contract negotiation, oversight. I thought I knew the industry. What I learned working for government is the operations of the business. I never learned the business. It wasn't what we needed to do. I moved to the multinationals, I moved to the companies, I worked in different places, including in strategy. And I found out how much I did not know. And when I started doing local content, the first place I went was to the company engineers, the company procurement people, project management people. I was working with the companies, and I went on platforms and asked superintendents, what are the skills of this shift of people here? What do they do? What are their titles? What training do they need? That is nowhere written down, except in company manuals. Yeah? You don't get those things on the street. So although we do good literature research, it's a body of literature that's not accessible to the general public that we need to drill down into. And you'll see some of that when I put some slides up later. Yeah? So, local content is an outcome on the way to some national development goal. Yeah? So it really happens when people are employed or get contracts to provide services. So we have to, anything we're doing in building a strategy for local content must ensure that we're delivering that through employment and procurement. Now, we've put things in place in legislation, in contracts, we must be employed and so on. That is necessary, but not necessarily sufficient. And I'll show you why as we go along. Yeah. Nobody gets employed or is given a contract unless they're able to do the job. So a precursor for local content is capacity building. And sometimes we merge the two as one. And that may be right, depending on where we are, what we're trying to measure. If you're measuring things and you want to be clear how you're proceeding, you must be clear what you're measuring. So an example I used in an earlier presentation in Nairobi was that capacity building speaks to who you train and get ready. Say that I were to train 100 welders, my measure for success is 100 welders have been trained, 100 graduated, 100 certified. So that's the measure. Yeah? If I now employ 10, local content is now the salaries and benefits of 10 people. 90 is not local content into the operations. 90, the full number is the amount of our capacity was built. So if you're going to do anything on local content and you want to go somewhere, as we all know, you have to be able to measure success. And if you're measuring success, you have to be clear what you're measuring. So local content is an outcome. Capacity building is an input into that. And we have to do that. Yeah? What skills do you develop? Who decides what the priorities are? How do people go about engaging to do their part? So if the industry needs skills, what does the industry do about it? So there's somebody has to kind of guide how the stakeholders do their thing and put it so that always there's some consistency in how we go about doing things. And that's where the policy comes in. The policy puts in the guiding principles by which stakeholders will participate in the sector to conduct their role. But the policy itself doesn't come out of thin air. A policy is about implementing some plan, some strategy, some approach. Yeah? Which strategy itself says, this is a country that has so much in terms of resources, people, we have some priorities. Let us focus on those. And even so, we have to understand what are those priorities. How do we select them and build a strategy? Those have to be identified. And that is done through analysis of the sector, analysis of the country, understanding your aspirations, seeing how the sector's activities can support your national development objectives. And those are the kinds of things that are going to define your goals for your sector, your goals for your country, your national development objectives. And those are the things that then lead into your strategy, into your policy, and down all the way down to getting people employed or contracts given. But all of these things change in time. Yes, the state of your resources, level of activities, the nature of your skills and services base change over time. So somebody has to make sure that we are actually keeping up to date on what we intend to do and are getting the outcomes we done so that the policy we've written, the strategy we have are still relevant even as things change. And that is where the regulator comes in. Somebody has to make sure that what we set out to do is happening. It must be assured that we're getting what we set out to do and we're taking the right approach. So getting local content is not a single event. There are many parts that are all connected, each influencing each other. And if the precursor doesn't facilitate what follows, then you don't get the best outcome. If what you're doing isn't well set up by what's ahead of you, then you don't get the best outcome. Yeah? So you have to be thoughtful about what you're building, how you're building it, and how things are staging to each other. Yeah? And I'll show some other graphics to show that all these bits and pieces have many stakeholders involved with different rules at different times in different places. Capacity building, what's involved there? First, we need to know what skills we need. What kind of people? Now, and as you see later on, skills development is not a straightforward go to a class, take a course. Then we have to see who's training them. And then we have to ask, what is the content of that training program? What is the capacity of the training institution? And then we have to ask, so if we're training kids, how many do we need to train? We train 200 engineers per year, as Tanzania is doing, petroleum engineers, and turn them out. And there are only 10 jobs per year. What are we doing to the economy? Where does that data come from? It comes from the oil companies and the activities, or the regulator who aggregates it. So there are many stakeholders involved in every stage of decision making in putting these things together. If these stakeholders aren't aligned, we have real problems. And it goes way beyond what we think intuitively. So for instance, in the local content, and the laws that affect local content, there are a huge bunch of things there, but there's a whole bunch still missing. If I wanted to bring steel in, bring welding rods, fabricate stuff for the offshore industry, or in Kenya's case of the industry, I would have to pay tax or duty to import those things. Typically, oil and gas laws and contracts give operators the right to import this thing duty-free. So the foreign company building it doesn't pay duty on his part. Local companies have to. That's a flaw in the taxation law. But who addresses that? Who knows that? And there are those kinds of nuances that you have to really get to tease out. And to do that, you really have to have a joined-up approach where all the stakeholders understand the role they play, how they relate to each other, and how they can support each other. And somebody has to see whether they align or not. Otherwise, it just won't work. Yeah? So, given all of that, if you want to measure, you really want to get a simple definition of local content. There are many different definitions. Mine isn't the only one. It isn't right. Yeah, you can always change it. And I think actually it needs to be defined for your objectives, what you're trying to do at any point in time. And you can change that. In Trinidad and Tobago, I wrote the local content policy in 2004. And then writing that, 2003, I actually put a clause, a local content will be defined in the future. Right? And the reason for that is that we weren't clear what we wanted. It was finally defined in 2014. And it's exactly as the Kenyan bill has, I think. The percentage of money spent that stays in the local economy. Yeah? And that is something you can actually measure, and I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. Yeah? So it's difficult to design a measurement system. It can be very, very administratively difficult. So you want something that can be simple and easy, and consistent. If you have different ways of interpreting it, it won't be clear what you're getting. Yeah. So what I suggest is that in all businesses, all inputs, whatever they are, and including oil and gas business, all inputs can be measured in its cost. Now think about this. For instance, a company lets a contract to do anything. Companies bid, and they bid. What goes into that bid? And goes into the contract? Well, 4 things go into the contract. 1, the scope of works. What are the things that will be delivered over this contract? 2, the activities involved to make those up. 3, the resources you need to deliver those activities, the people, the equipment. And 4, the cost. There's also time factors and so on. Yeah? So every activity ultimately has to have a cost behind it. And that cost is derived from the inputs. And you can do that. You can find that out. Yeah? So, again, economists say this all the time. There are 3 factors of productive activity or productivity. Land, including raw materials, labor, whether it's skilled, unskilled, manual, otherwise intellectual, and capital. Now, you might argue, where's technology? Well, with capital you can buy technology. In fact, a lot of the world today is about outsourcing things and buying things. Sometimes people argue for local content, and they say, I have a local contractor doing this earthworks for me, but all his equipment is Chinese. Do I count that as local content? Or is that Chinese content? Well, I ask you, where did that come from? This guy bought it, right? So he owns it. Whose money did he use? Did he use local capital or foreign capital? You know, so the input is the capital. The capital was used to buy this product. So it may be oversimplifying, but it's getting me to a point I can compare apples and apples. Yeah? So here's the thing. If I were to say that everything can now be measured in shilling value, dollar value, what does that tell me? It tells me that local content can be measured in the revenues or the income received by locals through employment, in the revenues received by contractors for providing services, and the money received, the income received from people who give credit or put equity in. So the capital is repaid, the labor is repaid, the services are repaid. Yeah? And that is one way to measure it, and that's how we came to our definition in Trinidad and Tobago. So therefore, if you can find a simple way to measure local content that we can compare across projects, can we do the same thing for measuring capacity building? You know, you can talk about the cost of capacity building, we can talk about the number of people trained, or we can drill down even further, or we can say, let us focus on the number of people certified, because training doesn't make you job ready, it's certification. So it depends on what you want to measure. The point I'm making is that there are different things you can measure. In the circumstances you are at, you will choose what you measure. In early stage, as Kenya is, before you get into operation, we've built critical mass of skills, your focus is on building capacity. And you may want to use that as a metric, the things you measure and report on, more importantly. So over time, you can have curves that cross, that your measurement and your targets are on capacity building, and over time that'll go more into actual goods and services provided, employment, local content. So keep that in mind. Now, I put some other things that are a little bit funny. I think Moenda mentioned it this morning too, that in addition to the direct goods and services, the direct skills that you need to do oil and gas activities, there are a lot of things that you also need. So we know we need, we're going to export oil by road tanker very soon. Who's providing those roads? Who's maintaining those roads? There's a cost to that. There's some building capacity in the sector to support that. Now, the road happens to be there. So there are other things that you need, and I'll show you some of those later on too. There's a whole supporting ecosystem that we need for the industry to work. Now the good news for that is that if we have to improve the port to get this oil exported, then that port improvement works can support other sectors as well. In fact, Trinidad and Tobago learned from Ghana in that way. So Ghana, I'll give you the story, in the 1960s decided that a wasting asset could be converted into value. So Ghana had the Volta River, and all that water was just rushing into the sea and being lost. So Ghana said, let's convert that to something of value. And they built the Akosombo Dam and the power plant at Volta River to get power from that. So they converted water into hydroelectric. Now, hydroelectric power doesn't create value itself. It creates value somewhere else by somebody uses the power. So you needed somebody to take this power. Population of Ghana, level of development, the network of infrastructure of electricity delivery didn't support delivering it to houses. There wasn't enough to pay back for the plant and the dam. So what did Ghana do? Ghana got an investor to invest in an industry that had a high power demand, aluminum. Ghana had what? Bauxite. So Ghana uses bauxite to convert it to aluminum as an industry. There's another backstory to that which I'll tell you later on, which shows how unless you're careful, you don't get the value that is due to you. Yeah? So Ghana did that. Now, in doing that, of course, Ghana had to, well, let me give you the story now because that impacts the next story. So the company that invested in Ghana developed the mines and built an aluminum smelter. Now, bauxite to aluminum is a three-stage process. The first stage is mining, where you get bauxite, and the Ghanaian bauxite is high quality. The second stage is refining, where it's converted to aluminum oxide or alumina, and Ghana's bauxite converts 100% to 50% alumina. And the third stage is taking aluminum, putting it through electrical anodes, and making aluminum. And Ghana's aluminum goes 150-25. So 100 tons of stone rock is 25 tons of aluminum. Really high quality. But here's what happened. The investor developed the mine, built the smelter, but never built the refinery. That investor had a similar mine in Jamaica. So they built in Jamaica a mine and a refinery, but no smelter. So what did they do? They would mine in Ghana, ship it to Jamaica, smelt in Jamaica, bring it back to Ghana, refining in Jamaica, smelt in Ghana. They would take the Jamaican alumina from Jamaica's mines and smelt it in Ghana too. What that meant is that the value went into shipping, smelting, refining, smelting. So the host country didn't retain value. Yeah? But they got jobs in the mines. That was their objective. Yeah? They didn't see the value chain and understand it. They also didn't think they had the negotiating power or didn't know how to get a better deal. What they were looking for was local content. Now, I give you that story to say, because of that movement of goods back and forth, Ghana needed a port with the supporting facilities around that port. So they built Tema. And then they used the power to build at Tema an industrial estate where manufacturing happened. And Tema became a very vibrant port. And they built a refinery, imported crude and refined oil. So here's Ghana taking a resource that is wasting and creating the basis for industrialization for national development. In Trinidad and Tobago, fast forward 15, 20 years, 60s to late 70s, we had natural gas being flared by oil companies. At a time when oil prices were very high. And because oil prices were high and we found a big oil field, and by the way, Trinidad and Tobago has been producing oil for over 100 years, for those of you who have heard me say this over and over again. And been producing natural gas and using it in power, first in 1953, and then to fertilizers in 1959. We have a long history of oil and natural gas, but companies were still flaring gas because of their own economics. So Trinidad said, let's take this flare gas and convert it. So what did we do? We took it to power as the easiest conversion. Who were the anchor tenants of the power plant? An aluminum smelter. We didn't have bauxite, we didn't have iron ore, we imported it from Brazil. Couldn't consume all the iron we had, so we had to export it, so we built a port. We had a power plant, a port. What do we build next? An industrial estate. That port is now the biggest container port in the country, so it's serving things other than the industries. So that's a way we use, and now, because we had that natural gas to power, we now have 2.5 gigawatt of installed generating capacity. So thinking about close to what Ghana has, and we have 1.3 billion people, and Ghana is 20 plus million people. So, but most of that goes to industries. So we have a lot of industrial activity based on that natural gas. And so we built infrastructure which supported the development of natural gas. Without the port, the natural gas wouldn't be developed. Yeah? So there's a lot of capacity that needs to be built that is not directly in line with the value chain we're talking about. So again, why is it necessary for us to define what we're measuring? Before this time and again, what gets measured gets done. If you don't know where we're going or what we're doing, how do we determine success or not, or find ways to improve? Yeah. So there are many ways, given the differences in capacity building, local content, you can define local content in different ways. I give you a simple one where is the value of what goes into it. Yeah? You can decide to choose that you can add up all the inputs and all the outcomes of all the stages I described, from capacity building, development, and capture. Or you can pick one or two. You can pick capacity building and supply enablement, and you can capture the value of those inputs and the benefits you get into the local content and employment. So you can do all kinds of things, different models to it. So you have a choice to make. Yeah? And in my mind, you can decide that local content is an input at a different stage, or you can define the inputs over several stages. So whatever you do, you have to understand two things: what you're measuring and how you're measuring it. And how you measure it is how much of that is retained by locals. Yeah? So keep that in mind, and keep in mind too that you can actually measure what's happening at the local, or sometimes called subnational level. Now, subnational is another thing that sometimes uses local, subnational, and the different kinds of things. But let me see if we get this working here. Okay, good. Okay, so if we say that local content is a function of capacity building and procurement, then how do we increase local content? By increasing the capacity of people, businesses, giving them better access to what it needs to run businesses. We can also capture more value if we implement policies and strategies properly. If you don't, there's a lot of leakages, and I can show you how that works later on. And of course, the coordination of that is quite important. Yeah. So, summarizing it, local content requires enhancing local capabilities, increasing the capacity. Now, I have a slide with definitions, and sometimes we confuse capacity with capabilities. And in developing locals ready for employment, we must be clear what we're targeting, because many people get trained and get skilled, but aren't ready for the job. Have they got the right capabilities? In fact, the term we use in the industry is competency, and I'll describe that a little bit later on. Okay? For that to happen, companies who are procuring goods and services have to have strategies that enable or favor local content. There are ways to dissuade local content, the way companies might design, deliberately or otherwise, the procurement strategies. Now, one of the things that happened over the years, starting in the 1990s, but in the 80s, when the oil price dropped, companies decided to outsource. And they started outsourcing a whole lot of services and tried to keep in-house their core competencies. And over time, it decided to shed more and more core competence, or what was considered core competencies. So for instance, things like geology, geophysics, legal, commercial, they will keep in-house. They might actually outsource the acquisition of seismic services. In the old days, up until the 80s, companies owned their own seismic crews, seismic vessels, drill rigs, research labs. In the 80s, when the oil price dropped, they got rid of some of those. Over time, companies are getting leaner and leaner and laying off services. Now, what that means is companies have preferred suppliers or contracted suppliers to service multiple business units across perhaps different jurisdictions. And those regional or global contracts say you will get all the work in these 5 countries. What does that do for locals? That's a company's choice in running its business. Where does the country stand? How does the country run its business in terms of how procurement is done? There's a natural tension there in what works best for the company and what works best for the country. How does the country know that? And how do they engage in, let's look at that procurement process. Similarly, companies can say, it makes good sense for me to hire locals, and for locals to do this. Traditionally, we put all these services together. So for instance, a classic set of services in field development is engineering, where you design equipment, facilities, the procurement of the inputs into that, the construction, and then the installation, commissioning, hookup and commissioning. So there are different stages along that. Companies can choose to hire a single company to manage all of those, which means that any company doing it must have a whole range of skills and people. Or they can hire companies to do various pieces. Now, if they were to hire all in an infant industry country like Kenya, no company will qualify. But they may say, I will give you this contract, but you must hire locals to support you. That may be one way. Do you get what you want? Because I'll show you later on that what we do in operations is necessary, again, but not sufficient to get the benefits you want to get. And I'll show you how we used that to push for more local participation. I don't know why this is happening, to be honest. Yeah. In any case, so local content has many parts, and in addition to making sure people get trained, get hired, is making sure that there's a system in place to ensure stakeholders understand their roles, their relationships, and there's a system of management measurement in place, that what you measure, the targets you set, are actually implementable and transparent. Because one of the challenges we saw with the Nigerian schedule and the Ghanaian schedule is that they did have targets, and I understand it's been copied into the Kenyan draft. What are those targets based on? And that, having done that myself, I know how difficult that is. And I'll give you an example of what we had to do and what was involved. So we said in Trinidad, and I was looking for a company then, we will build platforms in Trinidad. And the engineer said it's impossible. Why? Because we haven't got the capacity. Fine. So go do some work, see what capacity we have, and tell us what we're missing. And they came back and said, with the capacity you have to bring in more things. Once you've done that, the cost will go so high that you can't compete with the Gulf of Mexico, which we traditionally did. And we say, fine, what are those things we're not competitive on? Let's go through item by item in this process and build a platform. And it turns out all the steel was procured from Japan and shipped to the Gulf of Mexico. So there's no difference in shipping from Mexico to Louisiana or to Trinidad. And the steel is a big portion of the inputs into pattern fabrication. All the equipment, the compressors, the pumps, came from somewhere else, Germany, somewhere in the US, and was shipped to the fabrication yard. What the utilities were different, cost of power, cost of water, labor was different, land space rental was different. But it turns out for each of those, Trinidad was cheaper than the Gulf of Mexico. So if most of the things are common, and the competitive ones were cheaper, why are we more expensive? Well, we checked into that, and we had the engineers look into it. And the answer was that Trinidad just isn't as productive. Our productivity rate is lower. And we said, what does that mean? Are the people less well-skilled, worse off in skills? And actually they went and they checked. And our welders were trained to a higher level and more proficient than welders in the Gulf of Mexico. And there's a history behind our welding skills capability. And the way you measure welding capability is how much re-welds you have to do. And we had to do a lot less re-welds. So what was the difference? The difference was in workflows and procedures and people's experience in doing things. And you only get that from repeating it. And then having done it, you have a limit on how quickly you can go. And then we said, how does one improve productivity and workflow? So well, with the methodologies that the industry has used, and we can find out, and the people who practice this, and we hire them. And we put in place a system of productivity improvement. And when we designed the system, we had 14 platforms to build in a period of time. And we said, given the improvements we'll get at every stage, we estimate we'll be able to match Gulf of Mexico in price after platform 3. And we did it. Now think about the detailed engineering workflow processes, considerations, data that had to go into that. That's not easily available to governments. Yeah? That's where companies are helpful. If companies have the desire to do that kind of thing. And many times companies do. But they need direction, they need government to say, we can do this. Now, here's a challenge we face in building the platform. People are judged on their own deliverables. The first platform, project manager said, hang on. First to do that, we have to build a fabrication yard. There's none in the country. The cost of that is so high, it'll blow my project budget out of the water. It'll make me look bad. I'm not doing that. So we were faced with a position that we can't get this done because of a project, only there are 14 projects. And the way financing is done, and performance measurement is done, is based project by project. So we had to go back to head office and ask the question, can we get this investment spread over multiple projects? And head office said yes. And what else can we do? And we said, well, maybe we can get the government to help us with that. And the government said we can provide the space, we can build it, we can own the facility and rent it to whoever uses it. But if one company built it and used it, then you have a monopoly. So you have a common yard. And that strategy we use to build not only fabrication capability, but a competitive market in fabrication. Yeah? That kind of nuancing is critically important to building capacity. And those are the things you need to be aware of. So I won't bore you with those details, but I'll show some of them from time to time. So we know this is the oil and gas value chain, the different iterations for that. Beyond that, there's shipping. So as you go through, you move product from under the ground to above the ground. And then you can use products, things you've created to create chemicals. This is your beneficiation. And you can do it with natural gas as well into power. And then you have the support infrastructure and services. So all of these things play a role in getting value. And everybody who provides a service or good captures value from the resource itself. So the question is, if you're going after local content, where's the value? So in exploration and production, the upstream side has different stages. At every stage, money is spent and money is recovered. So if you consider a barrel of oil is sold for some arbitrary number, this number is just for illustration, then the cost of exploration, this bar, is recovered from it, so this is what's left. So is the cost of appraisal, which is recovered from it, the cost of development, the cost of producing it. Every stage has a cost. What is left? And then the company has its own in-house costs. Now, keep in mind, companies spend a lot of their money on third-party services. I mentioned they outsourced it. So a lot of money is spent on third-party services. They have themselves spend money on their own internal staff and accommodation and so. Yeah? And then the remainder is shared between government, taxes and royalties, and profits to the company. Yeah? Now typically what we went after as governments was revenues from the taxes and royalties. That was our focus. And as you can imagine, and I'll show you that picture later on, during this phase here, up to here, there's no revenue. Because there's no production. There's a lot of money spent. So government only starts to get money at this point here. This is where local content comes in. Local content says, hang on, if this money is being used to employ people to buy services, can locals participate there? Can they get some revenue and some skills that will stay in the local economy? And similarly, can the companies themselves hire locals, train locals, buy local services from the administration? So local content focuses on the bits and pieces that government taxes miss. But it also adds to the pool of taxes that government has access to. Because now these local companies can pay taxes in the local economy. So it adds directly and indirectly. Yeah? But here's something interesting too. So I kind of, actually over time, I actually went through, spent over many years in many different places. To come up with a sense of where's the money in oil and gas spent. And this was from some years ago. And there are several areas. And again, I looked at the upstream, midstream, and downstream. And I looked at the major areas of services. So I looked at what I call subsurface services, and I'll show you what kind of goes into that. It's things like deal with what's below the ground, geology, geophysics, petroleum, reservoir management. There's some skills, services, equipment, technology that you buy to do that, yeah? Interestingly, that only applies in the upstream side. It lasts for exploration and development into production. But it goes into production, which has an implication. Similarly, there are a lot of money, and then a lot of money goes into drilling wells. You don't actually prove you have oil until you drill the well. You can't produce oil until you drill the well, how wells do. And wells are very expensive. But again, drilling of wells and the services that go into it, cementing, casing, piping the hole, cleaning it out, making sure it works. Those are well services. Those only last until production. But they take up a big portion of the spend for in E&P. This pie chart only speaks to the spend in exploration and production. It doesn't speak about the downstream spend. Just to be clear. I have no idea why this is happening. So the point is that you can break down the areas of spend. And what I've tried to do is to illustrate that some of those areas of spend actually extend beyond anyway, you saw the graphic. Some of those services, like engineering, like logistics, like construction, like business support services, things like professional services, it died. I think this is, let me take this out. I think it's not really causing any problem. I think it's trying to identify this. So I just use a keyboard, basically pointers, yeah? Okay, this is the wrong one. Okay, let me get my slides. I got that. That's the wrong presentation. Over up there. Sorry about this. Hold this thesis. Don't worry, I have a fix for that. Every time it starts, something does that. So some of these services, like once you build things, whether you build, so in development, you see you build your platforms, you build your wellhead, your tanks, your pipelines in the field, and those things are actually built up during the development phase. Production starts, and you have operations, and maintaining equipment, maintaining things, so keep them working, greasing machines, changing valves, and so on. And then you also design, fabricate, and build things. Fabrication is where you construct a piece off-site and then move it onto site and put it together into the construction phase. So these happen from the development phase, but continue into the midstream and downstream. Similarly, operations support, the things you do to maintain operation will be managing fluids, temperatures, pressure, making sure things, pumps and so on are working. Those are necessary in petrochemical plants as well as in oil field operations. Logistics, you got to bring in pipe to drill wells, move rigs around, store things in the field, whether you're onshore, offshore, you may have helicopter support. Those are required for the whole value chain. And then again, I mentioned it before, oil and gas business is a business, and they need all the business services any business needs: IT, stationery, accounting, consulting, HR. And again, because they are world-class companies, they raise the standard of their suppliers, or they demand a higher standard from the suppliers for these things. And these go down the whole upstream, midstream, downstream value chain. Big areas of spend, like I said, are drilling and engineering and fabrication. Those are the big areas of spend. Operations is quite significant and continues on. What's interesting to note is that this isn't okay. Many of these services actually are required in other sectors of the economy. Engineering, fabrication, construction, logistics, business support services, operations, maintenance. If you have a plant, whether it's a factory or a hospital, you need maintenance engineers. Now, how is that important to know? The skills you develop, the people you need, are the same skills you have in those industries. Here's another example from Trinidad and Tobago that I can share. Our industry, like I said, was very old. But we had to develop people to operate because the fields were far away from the town in the country. So the first power plants. So you had to train people, so you built technical schools around those areas and train people to be very operationally focused. and to operate at a high standard. In the 1970s, when the oil price took off, and we found we needed more people, we built schools in the cities, and we used the same model. But the demand was on the oil and gas industry. But we didn't build for oil and gas, we built for the country. So a welder, a fabricator, a mechanic, an electrician can work in oil and gas, but he can work anywhere else, in manufacturing, in construction. And we designed the institutions and the programs to meet industry standards. Because we had to get people out who could work in the industry. So suddenly, people who were being trained for oil and gas at oil and gas level were available to other sectors. And that's why I say today, we were able to, our welders were more efficient than US welders. That's the reality. I'll give you another example of that. In Trinidad and Tobago, this is not a Trinidad and Tobago talk, but I'll use the examples as the closest to me. Based on the natural gas history, we've managed to build over 30 world-class natural gas processing plants, petrochemical, I mean big plants. Those were built between the 70s and early 2000s. Those were built with 95% plus local manpower. Every single one of them. All of those plants, every single one, was delivered under budget and in time. And the quality of the workforce were trained by, in our systems, in a model I will describe later that I think is useful to learn from. Now, it did not stop there. That training moved from fabrication into process, into maintenance, into all kinds of operations. So the plants themselves operate at high levels of performance. So two big 100% national owned facilities. A national gas company that transports 4.2 billion cubic feet of gas per day over thousands of kilometers offshore, onshore. Some pipelines as big as 42 inches, some as 56 inches, 46 inches offshore, 56 onshore. That company has been running now for 25 years. Actually, it was formed in 1976. It's never had a major incident, never had a major outage. One Easter, 2 years ago, we lost power for 3 hours in Tobago and for almost an entire day in Trinidad because there was some liquids came into the system and shut down one of the power plants. And there was a commission of inquiry into why we lost power for a day. And the power is driven by the national gas companies. That is kind of reliability. The natural gas we produce comes, a lot of it from oil fields, not all of it. And that gas has associated liquids. It has things that can be taken out. And that is converted into propane and butane, used for cooking gas and so on. The plant that manages that processes about 1.8 billion cubic feet per day. The rest is processed at the LNG plants. That plant, again, is 25 years, run entirely by locals, 100% locals, from president all the way down, for 25 years. It's had one lost time incident, one day lost time. It's had 98% operating efficiency. And it's had one demurrage, one instance in which a ship came to pick up cargo and it wasn't available in 25 years. And that is because of the nature of the training we put into our people at the operator level. What is also significant is that if you go to that plant and somebody takes you on a tour and he walks you around and he describes the processes, the client, the customers, how things work, and you ask him, what do you do? He says, I'm a technician, with pride. Now he may have a degree, yeah? But he says he's a technician. Yeah? And I'll show you how we get to that. So these are broad aggregations of services, but each of these segments of services can be broken down into different services. And I can show you different levels of detail. And it's important to do that because only when you break it down into the nuts and bolts do people understand where they can participate. Because in an infant industry, you can't provide big swaths of services. You provide something small. Where do I enter? And a key piece of information that local content requires, that SMEs require, is this kind of information. What do the companies buy? And how do they buy it? And how many do they buy? And for how long? And it's breaking down these bulk segments into the component parts that allows you to drill down and say, I want to go after this. Yeah? Again, the point I'm making, the devil is in the detail. And I can go on and on, and we can show that. Yeah? But each of these goods or services, each of these segments of service, typically have one or more of 4 parts: equipment, materials, services, or some combination thereof. And we went through and we broke down each of these. And companies typically have these in some form or fashion that they use to procure materials. And industry has some kinds of things they use to put these together. So you can, there's a lot of detail that can go in there. And when we were doing the local content policy in Trinidad, we went to the Built Enterprise Center, and for that we had to help companies. And one of the things we did is come up with lists of materials, equipment, services that companies buy. And those were like gold. People said, aha, I see valves in there. Let me find a valve maker and see if they can partner with them and offer some service here. Before that, he had no idea. What this does, the most important thing in local content, is putting a light at opportunity. Yeah? Now, there's danger in setting expectations, but you have to do that. Right? In the same way, I can pick a set of activities. Let's say this goes in from a project, from design, research and designing it, to constructing it, operating it, and maintaining it. There are different kinds of categories of skills or jobs that appear at different stages. So there are many different specialized jobs. Now, all of these jobs in these kinds of ways tend to come out of the core training you'd get in a technical or vocational institution. And I'll show you how people graduate from the base skills into the specialized skills. Okay? And you can get that across that activity chain in many different areas, all the areas of operations. There are many skills. And this is what we need to understand. What are the skills requirements, where and when? How many? Where is that detail? How do you find that out? How do people who want to train their kids or get a job know where that is? And that goes on. And it goes on. So there are many kinds of goods and services, many kinds of job descriptions, many kinds of skills. And you can look at it from different angles. So here's one angle that's quite interesting. This is an example from this is operations and maintenance of offshore producing facility, in this case a platform. And the platform operators describe it in terms of different kinds of services. Yeah? So each of these services, there's sub-units of service. Yeah? So the equipment includes engines and power generation. Maintenance includes technician, mechanical and electrical installation engineers, operation and maintenance technicians, automation and metering. Platform support includes painting, scaffolding. There's a whole series of things. There are lots of different sub-services. Why is that important? It means these guys here can have a small company and provide a service. And they can say, hang on, these things are related. Maybe I can add on associated services and grow my business. Yeah? But it's understanding how things are related, where they are. That is a level of detail that somebody has to find out. Local content is about doing things. To do things, you have to know what you're doing. Yeah? And I think a lot of the talk has been about policy and regulation. The rubber hits the road when they get to this level of detail. Yeah? So that is where I think it's important to understand that this creates opportunities for locals, but it also creates opportunities for locals to lose jobs. Because as big companies want to aggregate their suppliers, minimize the number of suppliers they have to contractors that are managed, they can tell a company, I want you to give me all of these. I don't want to manage all these small contractors. So again, depending on how companies procure their services, they can either facilitate local content or prevent it. Yeah? So the procurement procedure is critical in making local content work. And that's where the government and companies have to work. And if you do that, then the government can say, let us talk about what you want to do locally. And the company will say, let's see what you have. And the government will say, I have this, but I want to build this. And the company will say, well, to build that, people need to do that. So let's pull all these services and keep these for locals. Or make sure anybody doing this has a local partner or builds capacity. So the strategy has to be driven by what you want, but it has to be underpinned by knowing what is possible and how to get it. Yeah? And that kind of level of detail you have to build in there. How I do with time? You did tell me I should stop at 1:15?
We still have some time.
Okay, good.
30 minutes, yeah.
So, I come back to this picture here, and we've seen this, and I showed local content in the upstream, but keep in mind, local content can happen in the upstream, as you saw, for the support services. It can also happen, it can also have value addition, as we spoke about, in terms of adding value through, one, beneficiation, and two, if I build infrastructure, taking it value addition, lateral linkages. And many of the services, the parts of the sector can give you both local content and value addition. Yeah? So the skills you use in refining, in petrochemicals, are the kinds of skills you need in many plants. So when Trinidad and Tobago, we had an old refining industry. Our first refinery was built in 1912. During the Second World War, yes, we had the biggest refinery in the British Empire. Right? So we've had a long history of refining. When we decided to build the natural gas industry, we already had people who were trained operators in plants, in dangerous environments, who understood the safety culture, who understood valves, temperatures, pressures. So we had that training mechanism and pool to draw upon. When we started to use the natural gas for manufacturing, we had plants, you need operators, you needed mechanics. So that pool, so that capability in the refinery was able to help build a natural gas industry and support other industries. Now, what happened, of course, is as you build another industry quickly, it drags on those people who are already in place. So you create tension and you create a shortage. So what do? You analyze the market, analyze the demand. It's quite easy to train somebody at the ground level and train them out very quickly, and you can get those. What you have is a hierarchy of people with skills and experience, and the ones who are stolen first are the more experienced ones. In this case, the superintendents. Yeah? And those are stolen. So you saw superintendents moving from company to company, getting higher premiums. So then the training program moved to how do we fast track people to become superintendents. So nothing is static. You have to keep your eye on the ball. Understand what your demand is and find ways to fill that gap. Yeah? So although you have benefits, there are also challenges you will face. So this is the story, as we said. We have different parts of the continuum of getting to local content. Each part has a role in facilitating or implementing the previous part. Those pieces must be aligned and must target a common goal, which we say is national development. How do we get to all these things? We're talking about building capacity, hiring people, making sure things are in place. So these are the four pillars that Melba asked us to speak about three, but Melba recognized it in the report. One is about building capacity. And I speak to it as strategic capacity building, and I'll tell you why I say that in a bit. And the first one is training and skills development. Right? What goes into that, and what do you do to make sure it's happening well and you're getting the outcomes you need? First, you must know what you need. And that comes back to what are the activities that are going to be taking place. In those activities, what are the inputs in terms of services, goods, and so on? And for each of those activities, what skills do I need? How many? When? To what level? How do I find that? Again, I come back to the point I made earlier. When I sign a contract to provide a service, I have to know what it's going to cost me. To find out what it costs me, I need to know what resources I need to employ. To do that, I must build a plan with the activities and the inputs to the activities. So in oil and gas, because they're so robust, we demand we have good plans. And as we all know, a plan has methodologies for tracking information and for checking the information is right. So we all know that project plans have these things called Gantt charts. A Gantt chart is simply activities over time. And then these always lead to a cost. How does that cost come from? Well, every activity has inputs, has tasks. Every task has inputs, resources, manpower, equipment, materials. How many people, what kind, when, at what stage in the process, for how long. These are all part of your work breakdown structure, your resource breakdown structure, the cost breakdown structure. That level of detail is built into major projects. It's also designing operations It's somewhere there. How do we access that? How do we use that? How do we use that and say, we need 15 welders from June to June next year. Of those 15, 5 must be A class. And after June next year, we have a break of 6 months, and then we have another demand for 6 more months. And company B is going to come in that period and require 10 of those 15 people. Who hold that database in their head? Who makes that available to the market, to the universities, to the technical schools? That is the demand side that drives the capacity building inputs. Yeah? Like I said, the industry is very, very technological, very process driven, very risk managed, approach things in a very risk management approach. Yeah? So let me get this again. So I think this is a message. Yeah? So think about that in terms of the demand, what needs to happen to build, to identify the needs, qualify the kinds of needs you have, then build capacity to close this gap, and then make sure that you're tracking that you're always keeping on top of what your needs are, what your input capacity is, and changing the skills development requirements. That same thing applies to businesses. The businesses you need, the kinds of companies you need, are driven by the demand. What they have is driven by the kinds of work they're doing. How much? Again, the number of activities. And again, making sure you get the right company participation comes back to the measurement, monitoring, and the reporting that goes with that. So the same thing applies. The key to think about here is that you have to be very thoughtful in what you build. Because building capacity, building companies is an investment. It's a cost state. It drains economies. And it also sets up expectations. And I've seen it time and again where young people, bright young people, have been given scholarships. The parents have taken their money and sent them overseas to do some course in oil and gas management, in oil and gas law, oil and gas policy. And nobody has said, how many of these jobs are there out there? When these kids come back, will they be employed? You know? And so we have to have that conversation because I've seen a lot of disappointment. And I see in Tanzania now they're training 200 petroleum engineers per year. Why? Because the private university is making money. Yeah? And nobody's telling the kids, the parents of these kids, that there are only 50 jobs or 20 jobs per year. Yeah? So that is a danger. So companies need all these things. How do they get them? Yeah? Key thing is, of course, information. I come back to that from time and time again. These are the things companies need. Now, again, I mentioned that third leg is procurement of goods and services. Come back again, and I keep reading it. What is the demand? What is the current capability in the supply chain? How do you prioritize and focus areas to build capacity, to get locals to provide more goods and services? Building those strategies and implementing it must consider the demand over time, where we're heading as a country, what we have, and making sure we get where we're going. Yeah? So every stage has analysis. Every area has a detailed analysis, strategy, and then putting things in place to measure performance. But the key is that all these pieces have to be coordinated. And somebody has to be keeping an eye on whether we're getting the right inputs and the right outputs and the right outcomes. Who is doing that? Who's making sure that these private universities understand what the demand is, and that the students or the parents understand what the market is? You know, whose role is that? You know, who is holding stakeholders accountable? Is there a role for the Ministry of Education, for instance, in that scenario? And who is saying, this is what's happening, people? This is what we've done, this is what we're getting, this is what we're doing, this is how we're improving. And again, none of that will work unless we have a way to measure things, to report on things. And those to me are the 4 pillars of implementing local content, yeah, or in-country value addition. Yeah. That's the general framework and context I wanted to introduce, which you asked me to this morning, yeah, which I hope gives you a sense of where we can now drill down into, we're going to build skills, we're going to develop companies, we're going to address procurement. How is that done? This is the what we need to do. We're going to get into the how. Until we get into the how, we're just talking theoretical. Yeah? So that's my presentation for this morning, or for this session. I would love to hear your questions and concerns. I know for sure I've spoken too quickly in many places and you didn't understand me. I know for sure that my accent would have eluded some of you. So given that, feel free to ask any question for clarification, as simple or silly as it sounds, because I understand that I am not a good communicator. But if I can help on a second round, I want that chance. So please, any questions? Oops, my goodness.
Thanks for that very interesting presentation. My question is, and I'll exaggerate it a little bit, between the parties that are involved and management, the tension field between that. On one side you have the oil and gas companies, technical, managing risk, used to that, want to do an economic project, see the value of local content, but they also have all the knowledge. So the example that you described, pushing in Trinidad and Tobago to go to do things that initially were not possible, or which the company said they would not be possible, by looking beyond the industry, by looking beyond the country, I think it's very important. On the other hand, you have the local government, country that wants to have the maximum, doesn't have the knowledge, and needs to go into this debate, which needs to end up in a win-win, and the answer, we want everything, resulting in a not implementable local content policy. I think we both have seen examples of that where at the start of the policy it's already known that you're not going to be able to achieve it. How did you, or in general, how can you manage that relation to come to a sharing of knowledge, mutual trust, say achieving the end best result?
It's a good point. I can give you two examples where, and it's not about me, but I was involved as our full-time knowledge. Yeah. So I worked as a major oil company. My role in the company was developing gas fields, and my specific role was making sure, because in Trinidad we already had a very well-established supply chain, the pace of field development and gas production, we were moving to the first time to liquefy natural gas. It means we would outstrip the capabilities of the local supply chain. We'd have to bring in foreign companies. In a market that was accustomed to being very competent and very capable. And in addition, we were exporting raw materials. This is something that Trinidad and Tobago did not do. Trinidad and Tobago from the 70s to the 1990s, the 50s, added value to natural gas. Power, ammonia, fertilizer, and like Kenya, we had in those early days an agricultural industry. And the first thing we did in natural gas after power was fertilizer, and so on. So we had to get the license to export natural gas as raw material. We had to show the country we can add value in other ways. So the onus was on us to find where that value was. My role within the company was to do that, interrogate the value chain, interrogate the operations, the procedures, and find ways to break the tradition. The biggest challenge was doing that because, as you know, we keep saying it, the oil and gas industry is high risk, high capital. What oil companies do very, very well is manage risk. Now, there are different ways to manage risk. An easy way to manage risk is to avoid it. If I bring in a new supply chain, a new supplier, I introduce risk. A project manager has three very clear things to work with: scope of works, cost, and schedule. If I were to introduce into that, I want you now to introduce local suppliers who aren't quite up to speed, who capacity you need to build. The project manager will find every reason why that can't happen. He's avoiding that risk. So I had to break that. What we did is say, fine, let us add a fourth element to every project. For every project, tell me how you're building capacity. That changes the dynamic. It changes the conversation. Yeah? But that came from inside. The government may not have thought about that. And then it was about, and those breakdowns of goods and services, of cost, that came from inside. I was able to then, because I was previously a government employee, I had a different kind of profile in that market. And as I was at one time the president of the Geological Society. And I used that hat to call together different stakeholders to say, we are about to embark on a growth in natural gas and a change in the industry dynamics. We need to work together. Here are the bankers, professional associations, the chambers of commerce, university. We need to get ready for this. And we needed to do three things. One, what is the demand for goods and services? Two, what is the supply? And three, what do we do to close any gap we find? And we put people to do those things who were very capable, from within the companies, from the professional bodies, the engineers, the geologists, the bankers, and together we build these things. We design surveys. We walk to every engineering firm and ask, how many people you have, what skills do you have? So we build these details from the ground up. But I was able to do it from the outside, in a neutral position, and it was brought to the government. The government came in afterwards. In fact, the government used that data to design and build a new university because of the demand from that. Yeah? That's one example. Another example is I was asked by the Minister of Energy at the time it was called in Ghana to have to review their policy and have them implemented. So I read the policy and I told the minister, if I could prove to you that some of these policy instruments or some of this policy isn't implementable, can you take it back to cabinet and get it changed? And he said yes. So I actually sat with the minister, his deputy minister, and his technical people for several hours one day, going through the policy line by line and asking, what do you mean by that? And one line said, for instance, by 2020, Ghana will have 90% local content. And I asked, tell me what that means. Well, said, well, 2020, of all the people employed in the industry, 90% will be Ghanaian. Fine. So let me ask you, if you have an oil rig working with 100 people and 90 are Ghanaians, does that hit the target? And he said yes. I said, and if I show you the wage bill, and of those wages, the locals got 25% of the wage bill, and the 10 foreigners got the rest 75%. Is that what he had in mind? I said, well, not really. As I said, now we're talking. The devil is in the detail. Yeah? And until you get there, you can't set numbers. Yeah? And that is, I think, the part that's missing out. How do you get those numbers? You have to work in collaboration. The example I gave you in Trinidad is that here was the company whose interest it was to make sure that the government was able to align with it. That happens more often than we think. Yeah? And I'm sure Susanna said that. There's much more alignment of aspirations than we think. But we don't have the right conversations, I don't think. And quite often what is missing is a translator in between. Because when I went into Ghana, what I told them is exactly what the companies have been telling them. The companies have been saying exactly the same thing. So a neutral party coming in and saying it, who's credible, has no vested interest, might help. Yeah? But it's getting that neutrality in the conversation. So there are different ways to do it, but it's possible. Anything else? Wow. This is a very well enlightened audience, a very hungry audience. Can't tell yet.
I want to look at this industry in a different way. If we are able to implement the local content provisions in our laws, then there will be an influx of foreign currency in the sense that this particular industry will boom. And if that is the case, then I'm looking at a scenario as to other sectors in the country, an example being the agricultural sector. The produce that Kenya has, an example being tea, then would not be able to compete at the export market. So for me, I'm looking at how do we balance in the next 20 years to come that not everyone concentrates in this particular industry alone to the detriment of other industries in the country.
Good. So I came in last night from Dodoma, I spent 2 days with the Tanzanian government going through this exact same problem. And the approach they're taking is they've built a local content implementation strategy. Right? How do you now put that into place? And their strategy is, their policy for local content is across the board, like Kenya is doing. And what they're saying is, we have major sectors of the economy that we want to build. How can we, one, put local content into that, and two, make sure we support each other for growth? Because the challenge you described is one of the Dutch disease, where money coming into the economy pushes up the price of labor, pulls people away from the other sectors, causes inflation, and sometimes currency manipulation. So all kinds of things happen. Agriculture suffers because it's not a high-paying area. People leave the agriculture areas to come to the cities where there's government jobs, typically. So all kinds of things happen. So how do you stop that? How do you prevent that? Well, it's how do you, in parallel, support agriculture? Yeah? And that's what you're thinking through right now. Do you use, for instance, the presence of natural gas to ensure electricity in the agricultural areas? So we look at how refrigeration and keep their food longer. Do we use it to use the money we get to build more agricultural roads very early on, so farmers are more efficient? Do we use some of the surplus revenues to support agricultural development? So it's how you manage the economy as a whole. What needs to happen? Again, that needs to be coordinated, and that's what Tanzania is trying to do, so the National Economic Committee, and pulling the agencies together. And I think it will be useful for Kenya to have that conversation. And I'm hoping that the work we're doing in the National Local Content Policy would help start that conversation or push it along. But it is a coordinated conversation that has to happen. The other thing that it has to happen at many levels, because ultimately policy is made at the government level, but budgeting involves Parliament, and decisions around budgets influence policy implementation. So we have to have different levels of conversations, and there needs to be a country story that's developed and not seen as a party story. And that's one of the challenges in also these national development plans, is that they're seen as party-driven rather than national-driven. So that's something we have to try to overcome, close those gaps between parties. Does that help you? Anything else?
Yeah, just a quick question, very simple. We're talking about value addition, but there's also this idea of value capture, and you touched on it briefly around the flaring of gas and the opportunities to capture that value from flared gas. Of course, there's one which is energy, but the second is, as you rightly mentioned, is fertilizer. The key variable, I'm assuming, is the geophysical composition of the reserves, but what do you think, very simply, is the viability of producing fertilizers? As we keep mentioning, Kenya is an agricultural economy.
Sure.
Producing fertilizers from flared gas would actually be, a very good form of local content and development. What do you think the viabilities are?
I'll answer a completely different question. I hope I'll get to that. So we hear the question about local content within community content, and community content saying whatever happens here is for us. In Tanzania, they had the same question. This district has a gold mine, and they said they will build a refinery, and all the gold will be smelted in that refinery. Now think about this. What if the district next door finds gold? Do they bring it to your refinery, or do they want to build their own? Now you have people who are trained in mining in your district, or in oil and gas in the case of Turkana, and we make a discovery next door. Do you prevent them going out? Walls work both ways, yeah? Walls don't just block from one direction. Yeah? Now, I said that to say that's the level we started this conversation about local content. And I got you to the regional level. Yeah? So we have oil. There's a lot of gas in Tanzania next door. Right? What are we doing in terms of local content? If I were to say, what is the demand for fertilizer? What's the demand for engineering, for geophysical services, for drilling in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Uganda? I find that it's a good demand, but not enough to sustain the investment in it. So let her go to Europe or Asia, the Americas. If we aggregated the demand, suddenly find, hang on, we can build a center of excellence here for engineering. And across there, we can build a center of excellence for processing. We can do a world-scale aluminum smelter, but coordinated as countries. The power of collaboration is so important that local content tends to let us lose sight of that, and we shouldn't. You know, the whole region needs fertilizers. We should not be thinking, does Kenya have enough gas? We should be thinking, how can we get gas to fertilizer for the region? And that's something that somebody, again, that comes back to the politicians. You know, because politicians want jobs for their people, and they win elections locally. They don't want favors by thinking globally. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Stella? Yeah.
Thank you very much. My question is more or less related to the last sentence you've made. How do we, in this area where the resource is found, because we also are looking at local content, we want to benefit by virtue of this product being found in our locality. But how do we also have our stake in it without making our fellow Kenyans feel that we're demanding too much?
Sure.
Because, you know, they would say, even if you heard what the first presenter said, that the people in Turkana, it's like they're not aware of this resource. So how because this is like the lifeline, you know, God's mercy has finally come upon us. So how in such a way that we do not get into conflicts, and, you know, people look at us as if we are taking it as ourselves. It's, you know, I don't know the right word to use it, but we're not like claiming it all for ourselves.
Sure,
and then we stop the whole production. So I don't know how in other countries, if it's the same, that the resources found in areas which have been so much marginalized, like in Turkana, you know, we're playing catch up 52 years later.
Yeah. So I just wrote a local content policy for Guyana. I don't know if you know Guyana. Guyana is a country the size of, it's a little bit smaller than Uganda. Population of 700,000 people, not a big population. Guyana sits next to Brazil, Venezuela, and Suriname. And like Turkana, had nothing for a long time. They had a good forest, good hardwoods, some gold, some mining, but very, very poor. Exxon just made the biggest discovery in 10 years in the world in Guyana. The Guyana discovery is 3.9 billion barrels recoverable and climbing. The Ghana first discovery was 850 million barrels. So it's about 5 times, almost 4 times the size of Ghana's discovery, yeah? For a population of 700,000 people. So Guyana is part of the Caribbean Common Market, CARICOM, of which Trinidad is the most powerful part of the economy, and Trinidadians travel all around. And as you know, if you lived in West Africa, people who see Nigerians going around are resentful of Nigerians. Unfortunately, people feel the same about us. We have it and we flaunt it. Yeah? Yeah? So the first thing that Guyanese said is, we don't want any trainees here. And yet they have to write their policy. But in any case, in writing that policy, I recognize that. And in fact, in writing BP's, my own company's internal procurement procedures, I use similar language. And the language is this. If locals can do it now, they will be given exclusive access to it. If locals are in a position to grow into it, they'll be given preferential access to it. If it's something that is sustainable and has high value, we'll create a mechanism for locals to participate in it and grow into it. And if it's strategic and national development interest, then we'll fast track that. Right? So the strategy that speaks about the conditions and the pace of doing it. Now, how did we implement that in BP, my company? We had a tenders committee which I sat on. And typically tenders committees evaluate tenders on 3 characteristics: cost, quality, and timeliness. And we added health and safety because it was important to us at that time. Yeah? So we had all these things in there. And then we saw the local companies were not making it. And talk came up that everywhere, let's get the locals a differential in cost to help them make up. And we said, actually, that's not what's going to work. The reason locals can't compete is because they haven't quite got the capacity yet to do it. So I got the BP to agree to add a fourth element of evaluation, and it was capacity building. And for the different areas of field services, we asked which ones of these are national, are available locally, which ones are not, which ones are strategically important, which ones align with national vision, and we rated them differently. So to us, for a country to grow, Australia wanted to grow to an innovation technology company. We had a lot of good engineers, but no design engineering at all. So we rated design engineering 35% and capacity building. So the more you got, the more points you got. So even if it cost you more to train engineers, to bring systems in place, also was washed out in evaluation bit, in local content bit. So the different ways to do it is how you write strategies. Now we had a similar situation where BP is national, located in the country. The operations are offshore in a small village by the sea, remote from the capital city. People were asking the same questions. And we extrapolated that definition to the community. If people in the community can't do it, they'll be given exclusivity. If it's something they can grow into, they'll be given preference. So you can do that. You don't exclude people. Now there are benefits to that naturally, because you can find ways to justify it. I mean, for us, like I said, health and safety was important. If people have to commute to work, it introduces an element of risk. If people don't have to commute, it reduces risk. Use that to justify the situation. You can find ways to justify it, but you have to be thoughtful about what you want to do, know what you do, and find ways to make the two work. So you can do it. Does that help at all? Thanks. Suzanne? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Tony. My question is around some tension that is bound to be there. In the four aspects, you've mentioned the need to have an understanding of the demand data, which is important.
Yeah.
But there's also a time for when that data becomes available.
Good.
And then with that, then it has an impact on when the capacity will be built.
Good.
And then there's also the impact of when the skills, all the services are required. I think just for our audience here, it will be quite nice for you to try and explain how we can work around that particular challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's what Suzanne is saying, and having worked on projects, I know this. A project is conceptualized years before you actually deliver it. As you move from concept, you kind of come up with what are the options around delivering that. And then out of that, you select one option, and then you come up with some kind of design, and then at every stage you get some approvals. But what happens is that as your concept is more amorphous and less secure, you have a sense of what the activities are, what the budget is. But you know, your budget statement is this. The further out you are, the wider the bell curve. So you can go a lot further out. So your certainty is different. Right? So the nearer you get your certainty, so the way you go about, you have a concept, then we do front-end engineering, which is kind of early stage concepts. We get sense of cost, sense of what it will take. And then as we get approval for the concept and that type of design, then we go into detailed engineering. And that gives you a higher level of assurance of what you have. So now in the companies, we understand at every stage has different levels of certainty. Right? What we don't do well is get the community to understand that yes, there's information, but there's risk on that information. What is the risk? What is the uncertainty? So if I say, I found this natural gas field or this oil field, to develop it, I may need up to 15 wells. In reality, I may only need 10 wells. But conceptually, I can say, I can do 50. Only until I do the detail work, map the reservoirs, design the wells, model the flows. Only then can I decide, actually, I only need 10 wells. So of course, the activity that goes to 15 wells is quite different to 10. So the challenge is, how do I prepare the market for what's coming? And how do I do that in a way that doesn't set false expectations? If you think about the international consultants, contractors, suppliers, they get the front-end data. They know how to deal with it. They prepared for it, so they will risk it in some way, right? What we have to do as industry is try to find ways to communicate that to the business, because they don't need that long lead knowledge. What we're scared of doing is to give them bad information, or information that is used badly. So it's a communication issue, which is, and that communication can only come from the technical people saying, let me explain to you what this means. Yeah? What we lack in the industry are, again, translators. We can take technical information and make it easily understandable. And we don't have those. And that is a big, big gap. That connecting the two ends of the spectrum is so important. But the data is there in some form. We just aren't comfortable putting it out there because we know what will happen to it. What the industry does well, like I said earlier on, is manage risks. If we apply our skills to managing that risk, we can find a way, I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay, just one question. With regards to promoting local content, we have the prescriptive approach and we have the facilitative approach. My question is on the facilitative with regards to taxation system, like providing subsidies, maybe exemptions. So how does the facilitative approach focusing on the taxation system promote local content? Is it something that we can focus upon and use that approach to ensure that we encourage the multinational companies to play a big part in promoting local content? Thank you.
Sure. I'm a bit ignorant in that I'm not caught up on jargon and terminology that get into literature and get embedded as truths and realities. This facilitated, not facilitated. You always have rules, you always have guidelines, you always have mechanisms to support. So I don't think it's any one or the other. I think it's something in between. Right? You always have some rules, also have some flexibility. Yeah? Now, how does that work? The rules you have are a function of your ability to manage in the absence of rules. What does that mean? It means that if I have a regulator who is new, inexperienced, and companies are coming in and asking to do different things, how does the regulator go about approving it or not? Without guidelines, without tools. There are things that are systematic and standard, so he doesn't make different decisions for the same thing from different operators. So he must be guided by some standard procedures. These are embedded in some rules. Whether those rules go back into law or contracts is another question. But a weak or new regulator needs to have support. Now we talk about building capacity. And a capacity, you'll see later, has different characteristics. And in institutions, it's not just about the people you have or the skills you have. It's about the process you have. The ability to do things efficiently. And some of you have heard about 15 times, but I'll say it again for those who haven't heard it before. When we go to fast food places, we get really consistent quality product, don't we? When we go to a fast food, we get the same thing over and over, and we know what they're expecting. We hardly get surprises. We get an environment that's consistent. And yet these places hire people who typically have the lowest level of education and training, and have paid very low wages. Why is it that people who are not so well educated can get a consistently good product? And yet, in my country, certainly not in Kenya, we send our best and brightest students at the best universities in the world. Bring them back into the ministries, and we can't get anything from the ministry. Why is that? And I've looked into, and the reason is that these fast food places have very standard operating procedures. You don't choose what temperature you heat the oil at to fry, to do your fries, do you? And your supervisor makes sure you do exactly that. So there's standard procedures. Is that rules-based? Yes, it is. Yeah? Because you're bringing in a weak regulator, a weak employee, somebody who's not skilled at a chef. Yeah? So that person has rules. So you must have rules. Right? Now, if you were flexible, and operators came in and made a case to do something one way, who do you think will win that argument? And you have another way to do it. You haven't got the experience to negotiate. So where do you get these skills from? Or these systems and the procedures from? You hire somebody, get help from somebody who's experienced to write them for you. And as you learn and grow, you improve that. You customize it to yourself. Once that's customized, if you leave the job, the next person coming in doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. That's knowledge transfer. That's how knowledge is transferred from the consultant, the advisor, to you, right? But those rules then mean I have an efficient, consistent way of making decisions. And if I follow these, I'm held accountable. If I don't follow them, I can be held accountable. Yeah? Accountability is very important in getting things done in these kinds of areas. So I would say you always have to have rules. The question is how many rules you have, what kind and where. And that is very nuanced. That very much determines where you are. I mean, we heard earlier this morning that in the early days, Norway had some very strong rules for local content. When Norway joined the European grouping, they dropped some of those rules. At that point, Norway didn't need those rules. Norway's companies were exporting their goods and services, so they didn't need protection. So sometimes you need to protect your infant industries, and that's accepted in WTO. You are allowed to protect your infant industries to get them capable. Yeah? So you need rules at different times. So there's no one answer. I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah? There's no one answer, but you have to do it on a very, very customized basis.
One last question from this side.
There's some lady over there. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Antony, for the great presentation. I'll be pleased if you could share a copy of the presentation. My question is, on the transfer of knowledge, there are some models which have really worked on the skill development and also the certification to harmonize or to standardize wherever the skills are acquired in the training institution or from the experts. Yeah.
There's a lot of answers to that, but I'll give you one example in terms of knowledge transfer to show how the different approaches and see how those look, and then give you one look at certification. So if we think about an infant industry like this, and we want to train people to participate, and let's say we want to get somebody to be a drilling engineer or a design engineer. We send that person to university or technical school to get trained, and then he has the learnings. Now he or she needs to get hands-on experience. There's no activity in country at this point where he or she can get that. So we send them overseas to work with a company in their office. And here's an engineer who's going to learn design. And in this company office, there are computers, there are databases, there are workflows, methodologies, there are other engineers, other disciplines with different levels of experience he can draw upon. So he sits there, he's given a task, he has all the support, there's a great job, so he's ready to go. You bring him back home, he has no computers, no database, no procedures, no peers to work with. What does he do? You've transferred knowledge to him, but you haven't built the capacity of the organization. Yeah? What's the alternative model? What Nigeria moved to, and what Brazil did, and what Trinidad experienced in the early days. Do it in country first, and then doing it with nationals will come later. Bring the foreigners in, bring the equipment in, give them incentives, let them set up shop, let them do the work. Eventually they hire people. When I joined Amoco, which was before it became BP, our whole exploration department was in Houston. I was hired as exploration manager. I lived in Houston. Houston is and I was pushing for local content even before I joined the company. And my manager said, Tony, what would you want to see? And I said, I want to see exploration done in Trinidad. He said, why? It's because I sit in his office every day and I see schoolboys and girls walking by, and none of them will ask to become a geologist or geophysicist. And we will say we don't have geologists and geophysicists, because there's nobody employing them here. Why would they study that? He said, fine, but we don't have people to hire, so we have to bring in all these experts. It's expensive. I say, yes, and will cost recovery. Right? He said, but fine, but is that sustainable? I said, no. And we find a way to solve it. So we brought in 30-something geologists geophysicists, even technologists who would load seismic data and so on. After 1 year, these people are costing us $500,000 a family to move. After 1 year, my mandate was to reduce costs. Because we had the systems, the computers, the databases, the people, the methodologies, didn't have locals to fill it. So we said, fine, let's close that gap. So we created a petroleum geoscience program at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad. We decided we would train geoscientists, and we used the same model we had used for decades to train welders, fabricators in the technical schools. What is that model? One, the curriculum is designed by the practitioners. The geologists, geophysicists designed the curriculum so that you are being taught what you need to know when you start work. Two, the people who were working with us had enough experience and knowledge that they could train better than some of the university people. University people knew that. So the faculty included practitioners. Three, they were given hands-on experience, working on projects in the companies, getting access to data, systems, methodologies, and mentorship. And then four, they were getting financial support. Yeah? That program became a world leader in turning out geoscientists. You may find that far-fetched. But what we discovered, again, searching, is that when we benchmark the performance of our graduates against those from UK, Canada, and the US, they were outperforming them, they were up there. Why? We discovered that because we were giving this incentive to students, we were attracting the best students in the country. In the third year, that program was the most difficult one to get into in the university, because people saw the incentive of good jobs and scholarships. So if you attract your top 1%, and in the developed world, the top 1%, top 10% don't go into oil and gas. They go into medicine, law, finance. They have other options. So we were putting some bright people with a specialist training system. And we created a world-class institution in a very short time. So that's one way of transferring knowledge. You know, you can bring systems, people, the knowledge into country and create the ecosystem which locals can feed off and grow much more quickly. That's the other model. And that actually what happened in Trinidad in the old days. In the old days, people weren't able to just fly in and fly out. We took a boat from London, from UK, and it took weeks to get to Trinidad. You couldn't just send samples out to get examined by a plane. There was no plane. So what do you do? You had to build a lab, you had to ask people to process the samples and examine them and analyze them, and you need help around you. So the guys cleaning samples would understood what Gloriotalia means. He understand different fossils. He become a crazy paleontologist, and his children will like it, and they'll get into it. And having things in country created the ability for locals to participate and grow. Last one. Yeah. This last one, and then we go for lunch.
My question is almost like the one the lady asked. I'm Jacob Olonde. Mine is just to share from my experience, because from what I've listened to, it seems there's a form of legal transplant. Like it has worked somewhere. It's a best practice. It has worked somewhere, and there's need for Kenya to have it. And one challenge with legal transplants is that there's this thing people call the rubber stamping. It gets some donor who want it to work in Kenya, so it comes to Kenya and says it has worked somewhere, so there's need for it to work, and it will really work. But the challenge now is that we have so many of such laws which never get to work. So from your experience with legal transplants, picking a law from one country, from one jurisdiction, and taking it to another jurisdiction, what are some of the challenges, and what has worked and what has not worked, and what do you think will make the Kenyan case work?
Sure. So every country in every different time is unique. You can't cut and paste a whole system and move it from one place to the other. Now, there are good practices in many places. Here's how I would suggest you think about it. First of all, think about what you need. And get help if you need help to think about what you need, because you may not know everything. Figure out what it takes to do that. What steps you need to go through, what is involved in getting to where you want to get. and then have somebody else with you, for this step, who did it well? How did they do it? Who else did it well? How did they do it? Which ones of these can we adapt to Kenya based on our circumstance? For this step, who else did it? For this step, who else did it? So the point I'm making is that the model you use has to be a Kenya model. The practices you bring have to be specific to what Kenya needs and where Kenya is. So you don't pick a whole one, you build one. What you can borrow is a process. And then along the process, in different stages, pick and choose. I like how Nigeria did this. I like how Ghana did this. I like how Norway did this. And you pick the pieces. And that takes time. It takes effort. But guess what? This is a very, very valuable process you're going to go through. There's a lot of money is going to be involved here. One mistake we make all the time is this is going to be too costly. We can't afford it. And we keep forgetting the cost of not doing it. And we never measure what we lose by not getting the opportunity, getting it done right. So my answer to you is that there's no unique solution you can import. You have to design a Kenya-specific solution. But you can use experiences for different stages, different parts of your solution. Does that help? Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure you're bored, tired of me, so take a break like that.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And I love the way you've ended it, a Kenya-specific solution. Part of why we're here. Ladies and gentlemen, this design and how we've made this is not by accident. Part of why we designed it this way, that day one is training or capacity building, and then day two is the dialogue, so that tomorrow you're able to now fully and truly engage. I mean, I love the slide that you showed that there's like, there's 1,010,000 engineers for specific little things. Can I get a sense of how many engineers are in the room today?
These are technicians, actually.
Technicians, yeah, but they're still engineers. You know, this is Kenya, titles. How many, how many of us are engineers in the room? A sense, please? Okay. How many of us are training, are still in school? We've got a young man there. So at some point, I'll ask you to come for a couch conversation with Antony Paul. Craft your questions now. This is your one chance. How many of us are in the legal field? Aha. Yes, we have lawyers. Let's have the sense of how many lawyers there are in the room. More than half the room is lawyers. Why do you think that is? Because this is Kenya. We lawyers are everywhere, and we'll convince you that we know, even when we don't know that we don't know. Okay? Very important. In fact, economists, how many economists do we have in this room? This is why the country is going down the drain, because you'll never show up, you will speak. Okay? We're doing this little exercise simply because all this is part of what Antony has really portrayed a fantastic picture. The earlier session about the technical paper was just our way of putting out Kenyan context. But you need the world's experts, and Antony is one of them. There are a handful, I believe, that can come and start creating or painting a picture for decision makers. Now I'm glad there are so many lawyers in the room, because I know they occupy very important spaces. And therefore they're able to craft whatever, get whatever this information is that we're being given for free, courtesy of UK Aid. Thank you, I've said it. But courtesy of UK Aid. And then we got the next steps. Now, in the afternoon, Antony Paul will be back, but now a bit more specific, because this was more general, so that we can get an understanding. How many of us are surprised at how dense local content is? If you're genuinely surprised, please put up your hand. If you're genuinely surprised at how dense local content is, a few hands. Actually, quite more than a few. Okay? And yet this is something that we expect Kenyan households to be discussing, local content. What is that? At least that has been filled. And I also love the fact that he said we are so quick to send our children to grab the next opportunity without even knowing if there's an opportunity. Okay? But let's come back. We'll get now more detailed in the afternoon sessions, and hopefully then you're also crafting your questions for tomorrow's panelists, because we are going to put some people up on stage and we'll have conversations. Thank you. It's now 1:35. I suggest we be back by 2:15. Thank you very much. MC, tuko sawa to 15?
But that would be like 40 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, I think 40 minutes should be enough. So I think for some people may want to do some networking in the room. So could you kindly do that as we serve and have our lunch, so that we don't waste time?
The lunch is in the restaurant?
The pool deck. The pool deck, but they'll be directed.
Okay, so as you come out, kindly get a voucher and go to the pool deck, and then please be back by 2:15 so we start the next session. Thank you, everyone. Yes, you can leave your stuff here. It's okay. That's why I walked out. I didn't see you.
Thank you for this very, eye-opening. Yes, I like the way you have to do this kind of fashion because people need to know, people need to be educated if they are going to take out. Yeah, and I think this is right for us. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
In camera, John, our IT. No, it's the office. It's the office chat. It's streaming live. It's streaming live on YouTube. Oh. Yeah, it's streaming live on
Let me scramble. Because I remember last time you disappointed me because but it comes
The guy is coming.
How are you? Do you know David? Oh, namwambia imetoki.
But have you put this afternoon? So don't you know what time are you coming back? What time are we supposed to be back? 2:15? Yes,
so that's why we always ask yeah, exactly.
No, I know what that means.
I like it because
I love it.
This gives me benefits. Because I can also yes, I can go around where to keep a
No, I'll leave I'll try some things. Oh, you have another objective? You see this before, right? Someone told me don't try to like online course. I'm here for about 2 weeks. Am I on panel tomorrow or am I free tomorrow? I just trying to make panel tomorrow. Just if you happen today. Oh yeah. No, you don't know. You explain that. You play the tracks. Oh.
One of us will be okay, but I don't want you to eat. Oh, yes. And if you need someone to come and serve them, no, it's really not. They are really safe here. But it's just I'm very thinking about it as such a big. So,
So it's affected here.
You got a lunch voucher, yeah?
Yes,
Milk pair?
Yeah. Davis.
Yes, those are the third one. She's very nice people. She's on the top of the number situation. Yes, you can do that. Prince,